Welcome to WLX News Now at 10. I'm Mackenzie Martin. We received audio from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources on Friday related to the Nolan Wells case.
44 days. That is the distance between the 6th of July and the 19th of August. On the 6th, Nolan Wells was found on Horn Island. On the 19th, his family published a letter to him through CNN because he would have turned 19. So this video counts what those 44 days produced. One completed autopsy nobody outside the process has read. One independent examination that settled nothing. 60+ interviews, none published. A phone still unopened. And 3 prosecutions, all of them over threats. That is the whole ledger, and the letter sits at the end of it. Today, the 19th of August, is the day Nolan Wells would have turned 19. His family gave that day a voice. Through CNN, they published a birthday letter to him, and the 2 details that made it into the record are the 2 names they kept for him at home. They called him Nono. They called him their sweet sunshine. Look at the spelling in the source. Sonshine, not sunshine, like the sky. Sunshine, like the word. Sun is right there in it. It is a parent's word, spelled from a lifetime of knowing him, not from a dictionary. That was the morning of today. In the evening, per Widam, a prayer rally was held in Biloxi. Same coast, same calendar date. 2 ways to hold a 19th birthday when the boy is not in the room. Now put today against the days that are dated in the record. The official state autopsy was completed by the 31st of July, per WellBT. Its results have not been published. The file is going to a grand jury. That was decided 19 days, from 31 July to 19 August, 19 days, before the letter. The family's independent examination was done around the 22nd and 23rd of July, per ABC and CNN. Its answer, cause and manner of death, undetermined pending investigation. 2 separate medical acts fact, 2 failed to produce a number. On the 16th of July, Jackson County Sheriff John Ledbetter told Locks that his office had already interviewed more than 60 eyewitnesses. None of those interviews have been published. He also said the 3 friends who were on the boat that day have been interviewed, not named, not charged. And because Horn Island lies on federal land, per Locks, the FBI is helping with the digital evidence. The digital evidence includes the device in question. According to the GCWire, as of mid-August, phone has its analyst, not yet reviewed, they said. That's a device still more than a month after the 4th of July. And today, the day the letter ran, no one has been charged in connection with Nolan Wells' death. That is the line repeated after CNN, per NPR, per NOLA. The only charges attached to this case are not about the island. 3 people have been charged over threats aimed at a judge, a witness, and local officials, per CNN and PBS NewsHour. The FBI has opened a separate investigation into those threats, per Live Now from Fox. So on the 8th, the law gave the family no report, no charge, and no conclusion. They did not wait for them. They gave the world a birthday letter. The letter, that is not the final page of the case. Because the case isn't in after the letter, the case is in between. Between the island on the 6th of June and this letter on the 19th of August lies a count. And that counter started at something that remains unknown. The last independent look at Nolan Wells was inside a span of 3:23 to 4:27, a few days off. The boat left the island at 4:31, maybe the minutes, maybe a lifetime. The letter is the end of the counting. Now we go back to the day of the first page. So go back to the day the whole case begins. July 4th, 2026. Nolan Wells, an 18-year-old from Mississippi, took a boat trip to Horn Island with 3 friends. CNN and Locks put that trip at the top of everything that followed. That afternoon produced 2 clean marks in the record. The first mark is a window, per the United Cajun Navy, a volunteer organization, not law enforcement. And its report is not an official finding, via TMZ. Someone independently verified seeing Nolan sometime between 3:23 and 4:27. 64 minutes of verified sighting, nothing narrower, nothing outside it. The second mark is a departure. Per CBS News, the state's record has the boat away by about 4:30 a.m. between 4:27 and 4:31, 4 minutes. After 64 minutes of seeing him, the record gives you 4 minutes of nothing. Not a fact, not a detail, not a single confirmed sound. The state GPS picks the boat up again at 4:31, and that is the last steady click. Then comes July 6th, 2026. 2 days after the trip, Nolan Wells' body was recovered on the island. Per CNN and locks, the calendar flips a new page. Later we call summer with the date of count, the 6th marker on this case, which is exactly where the silence begins. Between the 6th and the 16th, 10 days, the public record has nothing. You have to count it. That is the empty part of the timeline. The next date to appear would come from Jackson County Sheriff John Ledbetter, and it arrived in the shape of a number. More than 60 witnesses interviewed, per WPLK. The medical cause. He also said, the FBI is helping with digital evidence because of the island. The 3 friends on the boat had been gone through interviews. That was the extent. Not a single one of those interviews has been published. So the first week, 6 witnesses, produces a count, 60, the interviewed, and a count of 3, the friends. No arrest, no suspect, no result. You can make the list, the famous list with numbers. 64 minutes, 4 minutes, 10 days, 60 interviews, 3 friends, 1 body, 0 findings. That's the length of the first page. That's what the week before delivered. 1 empty page and 1 sent page. But there was one left over, the 4 minutes. The 4 minutes were never untied by the state either. The first addition to that blank, by anyone, came later, and by then, the island had barely any of the answers, nothing. And the short time, also longer, the answer would come not from the island at all. It would come from what the same day didn't want to record. The letter will tell, November 19th, exactly during this. But first, the state's dark part had to go on, many details. No, we have a small thing that started the ringing, the parties, no. That afternoon produced 2 clean marks in the record. 4:27 to 4:31, 4 minutes. After 64 minutes of sight, the record gives you 4 minutes of nothing. No fact, no detail. The GPS catches the boat at 4:31, and that is the next thing the case knows. Then comes July 6, 2026. 2 days after the trip, the body was recovered on Horn Island, per CNN and locks. That date becomes the beginning of the 44, and between the 6th and the 16th, 10 days, the record is a blank page. The next date that appears belongs to Sheriff John Ledbetter, and it arrives as a number. The 16th. Per Tolocks, Ledbetter said his office had already interviewed more than 60 witnesses. The remaining 3 from the boat have each sat down with investigators. He mentioned the FBI, which is helping with digital evidence because Horn Island sits on federal land. And then he stopped, until no interviews were published, no transcripts, no findings, no conclusion. So, what did the week before actually produce? Make the list with us. 3:23 to 4:27, 64, 4:31, 4 minutes, 60 witnesses, 3 friends, 1 date of recovery, 0 published interviews. It's a skinny list and we wanted it to be, but do not say that. It is 1 sheet without answers, all, and still for the investigator open. And there is the 4 minutes. Those 4 minutes, between the final verified site and the boat's GPS coordinates, are the closest thing to a scar in the record. And the people who would eventually try to fill them, and teenagers' family were about to learn that the only way to close a gap like that is to hire some. The family would hire their own examiners before the month ends. The prosecutor would pick an independent, state would pick another bias, and say, the 3 friends would have something to say about, and there the phone, no, I'm behind myself. The final line you have, those 4 minutes in the island, and the other, same day, the law takes its own. The next voice in this countdown would nod in a witness. Something different, inside the whiteboard. Thursday 21. Provide final clean version. So go back to the day the whole case starts. July 4th, 2026. Nolan Wells, 18, takes a boat ride to Horn Island, Mississippi, with 3 friends, per CNN and locks. That trip is the first page of everything. That afternoon produced 2 clean marks in the record. Then comes July 6, 2026. 2 days after the trip, Nolan's body was recovered on the island, per CNN and Trilox. That date becomes the start of the count, and the days between the 6th and the 16th, 10 days, have no date in the public record at all. The next number arrives July 16th. Per Foles Locks, Jackson County Sheriff John Ledbetter said his office had already interviewed more than 60 witnesses. He said the 3 friends from the boat had been interviewed. Federal ownership of the island opened the door to federal digital help. Then he stopped. None of the interviews were published. No transcript, no summary, no name. So the first week produces a list. 64 minutes, 4 minutes, 60 witnesses, 3 friends, 1 recovery date, 0 reports. Now do not mistake the list for failure. It begins what actually happened. A recovery, 60+ interviews, federal assistance, and no one charged. That is not nothing. That is an investigation still in the dark. But it leaves the one thing the whole case will now turn on. There are 4 minutes between the last time someone saw Nolan and the moment the GPS says the boat went. 4 minutes of that afternoon have never been described by anyone. Whatever else the 40 days might produce, that gap does not move. It sits exactly there, at 4:27 to 4:31, waiting for the next record. And the next record never came from the island. It came from the nights after, from the people who were on that boat, from the people who now say their names. The law would not give the 4 minutes an answer, so the 4 minutes would go looking for one on their own. On July 22nd, the family received a conclusion that settled nothing. Their own pathologist reached no conclusion. Undetermined, pending, per CNN and ABC News. Those words land like a door left open. Undetermined, pending. The examiners did not say there was no answer. They said they could not give one. Not yet. 9 days later, the state answered in its own way. Well, LBT reported that Mississippi's official autopsy was completed by July 31st. Its results were not published. No cause, no manner, no summary. Instead, the findings were sent toward a grand jury. So by the end of July, the record had 2 documents. One said, "We do not yet know." The other said, "We will not say." Different words, same shape. Now add the detail that quietly changes the timeline. According to GCWire, as of mid-August, Nolan Wells' phone had not yet been reviewed by investigators. A phone that had been on that island. A phone that had been on that boat. A phone whose contents might narrow a 4-minute gap that nothing else in the evidence touched. Still unreviewed. Put that next to the more than 60 witnesses the sheriff's office said it had interviewed. 60 conversations. 3 friends interviewed on the boat. We don't know what any of them said because none of it has been published. This is the decision point. Not one date. A corridor between the 2 documents and the unread phone, where the case could have turned in several directions. The family's autopsy could have found a single, clear cause. It did not. The state's autopsy could have been made public. It was not. The phone could have gone to the front of the line. It sat. If any of those 3 timestamps had produced a different result in that stretch, everything after would have been a different story. But the public half of the story moved anyway. Threats reached the young men who had been on that boat. The FBI said it is investigating threats against the people who were with Nolan and against officials working the case, per Leave Now from Fox. One friend's attorney issued a cease and desist letter, and the only charges in the entire matter were filed, not over a death, but over intimidation. 3 people have been charged in connection with threats aimed at a judge, a witness, and local officials. That is it. Those are the only files. Meanwhile, officials watched the internet invent evidence. A supposed toxicology report was already circulating. It was fake, per Mississippi Public Safety Commissioner Sean Tyndall. The public said do not rush. Still, the numbers got more confident than the record, and the official record stayed. You can feel the shape of that makeshift month by now. 1 body, 2 autopsies, 60+ interviews, 1 phone unreviewed, and the last thing in the entire count, the only true interruption, was the day that did not claim evidence at all. That day was August 19th, Nolan's birthday, the 44th day since his body was found on Horn Island. While the case was sealed, unfinished, and silent around, his family made a decision. They were not going to get to write a report. They were going to write to him. And they wrote the letter standing in the heartbroken shadow of everything we just counted. It begins with his name, a name almost no stranger would know to use. That name is Nono. That name is Nono. Now hold that name against what the public actually knew at the end of the 44 days, because the difference between then and now is not as wide as you would hope. And that difference, or lack of it, is the whole point. In the first week, the publicly knowable facts were they. An 18-year-old vanished during a July 4th boat trip to Horn Island. His body was recovered on the 6th, per CNN and Deluxe. The United Cajun Navy is a volunteer organization, not law enforcement. And its report, per TMZ, put Nolan's last independently verified sighting at 3:23 p.m. for the span of an hour. A state's GPS track, obtained by CBS News from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, put the boat leaving Horn Island at about 4:31. And that was it. That was the then. Now at day 44, that timeline has not moved or produced. The same 3:23, the same 4:27, the same boat leaving at 4:31. 4 minutes between the last scene and the departure, and the gap has stayed 4 minutes the whole time. No new sighting, no new GPS fragment, no new sequence. In the same preceding weeks, the family commissioned an autopsy. Its result, per ABC News and CNN, was undetermined pending investigation. The examination closed at July's end. Per ABLBT, 2 full examinations, expected to answer, 1 unanswered, 1 hidden. Not changed. And the witness box? Jackson County Sheriff John Ledbetter told Walks that his office had interviewed more than 60 witnesses, including the 3 friends from the boat floating. 60 conversations, and the public will not hear 1 sentence of them. The FBI is assisting with digital evidence, because the island is federal. That is yes, the machinery moved, but the machinery is much bigger than the output, and the output is still no. Short version of the reason. Maybe not we know now. We know the number of the procedures. We don't know the results. More than 60 witnesses, no record. At least 2 complete exams, with words pending and not published at the end. Charges? Here's the one thing a person could look up. In these 44 days, exactly 3 people have been charged. 3 with threats, against a judge, a witness, and local officials. A trio of charges, per CNN and PBS. Every single charge of threats. And we find about the 3 friends. Not a die, not born. No one has been charged in connection with Nolan Wells' death. CNN, NPR, NOLA. And read. There are 2 real columns. Then we saw a span of safety. Now we see that the case remains sealed in silence. And what surfaced the gap? The extra. Not about homes. A public never gave the public the center. The family gave another object. It is at the end of the process. On Aug. 19. The day he was supposed to turn 19, and in Bristol that easily, there were parts in the square. What imported the heart? They still held a 19th birthday without him. Then they published the letter, through CNN in the day. August morning. Think about it. The letter is not an official document. There's no seal, no chain of custody, no authentication number. It will not be in the grand jury. The letter is the only item in the entire case that has no class at all except what it says. The public can hold it date for first time. So then are then and now spelled. Then, body, sighting, timeline, an autopsy, now, the same, but undetermined pending investigation, 1 unreviewed phone, 60 names we don't know all of, and a cell being recharged, not about the death, but about the threats. The difference between what the process knew on day 9 and day 14 is almost no change in the now. But the difference from then to now is the letter. It was never an official step. It was not endpoint. It is a mother's letter to a grown son who won't be 19. The victim's name, the name the public didn't know, the name that no statement from Jackson County used, is the first thing she said, Nono. A letter, and only the letter, carries the only new facts of the 44th day. The signature, already, not evidence. The knowable now is not an answer. We have to be honest with ourselves. There are 6 cases information. Yes. And it is still find. It is still no. And one child's family writes a letter where the official, they want the world to know, not the last scene, not the 4-minute gap, but the person, the sweet sunshine. Because when the grand jury has its day, and the phone is finally looked at, it will produce questions. That famous B remains in place. The letter, though, is the one part of the story that cannot be doubted. It is proof that the real person is not in the schedule. So here is the letter. And when you read it, keep in mind the state 20. Everything. 44 days. That is the number that runs under everything else. From the morning of July 6th, when the Jackson County Sheriff's Office confirmed a body had been recovered on Horn Island, to the morning of August 19th, when Nolan Wells was supposed to turn 19, CNN and Locks carried both dates. The time between them is a list of what the process did. Sheriff John Ledbetter has put his office's witness count above 60. Locks reported that on July 16th. 60 people. None of what they said has been released. The FBI is helping with digital evidence because Horn Island is on federal land, per Locks. Per Weltby, the state completed it and released nothing. The family's own independent examination, per ABC News and CNN, returned that one phrase, undetermined pending investigation. That is the entire list of what is known. Interviewed, assisted, completed, sealed, undetermined. It is a list of process, not progress. But here is what is not on that list. The letter. And the letter is the only thing from 44 days that will never be sealed. His mother wrote it, Christine Wansley. She published it through CNN on August 19th, the day he would have turned 19. CNN F2. She called him what she always called him, Nono. She called him their sweet sunshine, not a suspect, not an exhibit, not a timeline, their sweet sunshine. Think about what that letter is, and what it is not. It is not an official record, no chain of custody. It will not be shown to a grand jury. It is not evidence of anything except one thing. It is evidence that Nolan Wells was a person, and this is the day the public met him. Before that letter, the public knew the facts of his death. The boat trip on July 4th. The body on July 6th. The last independently verified sighting, between 3:23 and 4:27, a 64-minute window, per the United Cajun Navy's report, a volunteer organization's document, not an official finding, per TMZ. The island is behind them by about 4:31. The phone that had not yet been reviewed as of mid-August, per GCWire. All of it is the story of a disappearance. The letter is the first place where the disappearance stops being the only subject. They held a prayer rally in Biloxi on the evening of his birthday. Woodam F9. They gathered where he is known, for the boy he was. And then they published the letter. It is not sealed. It is not pending. It is not undetermined. It is a mother telling the world what she lost. Read it like that. Not as a clue. Not as a hidden message. Read it as the only document in this case that does not need a grand jury. The only one that is not sitting on a prosecutor's desk. It is the only artifact in 44 days that tells you who Nolan Wells was, not what happened to him. The state autopsy is going to a grand jury. F3. The phone has not been reviewed. F6. Investigators have interviewed every one of the 3 who were there. F17. They have received threats. The FBI is investigating those threats. Per Live Now from Fox. F19. 3 people have been charged over threats aimed at a judge, a witness, and local officials. That is the only charges in this matter. CNN, PBS NewsHour. F7. The death itself has produced no charge. NPR, NOLA.com. F10. All of that will continue. The grand jury will meet. The phone will be examined. The interview will be read. But none of it will change the letter. The letter is already written. It is the one part of the case that is finished. It is the one part of the case that cannot be disputed. The letter says his name. It says Nono. It says sweet sunshine. It is the thing the public gets to keep. And here is the hard part. The process is not done. It is not even close. The phone sits unread. The autopsy sits sealed. Names sit in a file. The case is still being built. The 44 days are not the end. They are the first 2. But the letter is a fact. The letter is a mother's words to a son who will not turn 19. And that is the object that will never be investigated, never be sealed, never be determined. It is the one true thing. So we hold 44 days of process in one hand, and we hold the letter in the other. The process tells us what is still missing. The letter tells us who is.